So with Starfield sharing a similar gameplay style to previous Fallout games, being a third-person or first-person shooter, it would make sense that they've expanded upon the Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 weapon modding system, and that's what I want to go over in this video. And a good place to start when talking about weapon modding is looking at one of the main ways you're going to go about obtaining these mods, and that's at the research laboratory. Now, the research laboratory is a station you'll be able to place in your outposts or in any of your ships, and presumably these will also be located in a lot of the cities throughout the game. Now, this is the station you're going to go to start research to learn how to craft different items throughout Starfield. And we've currently been shown 5 different categories: pharmacology, food and drink, outpost development, equipment, and then what we're going over in this video is weaponry. And this is going to be one of the main ways you go about learning how to craft weapon mods. Now, when looking at the weaponry tab of the research laboratory, we get a good look on how this system is going to work. So on the left side, we have the possible research projects, which show a handful of different mods you'd be able to research. Things like barrel mods 1, barrel mods 2, grip mods, optic and sight mods, and muzzle mods. Now, a bunch of these are blocked. And this person does seem to be a lower level, but they could research barrel mods 1, but barrel mods 2 is blocked. And this ties into the research tree, which is shown at the right side, where it shows how you have to go about unlocking all these different mods when you have them selected. So for barrel mods, you would have to research mod 1, then you would be able to unlock and research mod 2, depending on if you meet the other requirements. Because if we go down on the left and look at muzzle mods, muzzle mod 1 is actually currently blocked for this character, and this may be a level requirement or it may be a skill requirement, because at the center it also shows if there's going to be some required skill. And we know that in Starfield almost everything in the game is gonna have some skill associated with it, so there's probably gonna be one or a handful of different skills you're gonna need to spec into to be able to further research additional mods. And even though they are showing a specific weapon in the center of the screen, I don't think these research mods are weapon specific. They're not labeled anywhere as this, so most likely these are all just general mods. So if you say research barrel mods 2, anything that you can put barrel mods on, you'd be able to put this on. Now, most likely later in the game, there will be mods specific to different types of weapons. So if it's, say, a laser weapon, it'll probably have different mods you're able to research and equip on that than if you were just equipping the mods on, say, a ballistic weapon. And also, when looking at the left side, we do get to see that optics and sight mods go up to rank 3. Presumably there's going to be a lot more ranks in that as you level up and as you get more skills. And another good indicator of this is looking at the required materials at the bottom, because even though barrel mods 1 is only going to take some iron, nickel, and sealant, there are a ton of additional sections that can show required resources. In this window, they can actually show you up to 12 different resources required to research whatever you're looking at. So once you get into the much higher tier mods, it's probably going to require a high variation of resources, and it's probably also going to get more expensive in how many of all those resources you actually need. Now, the second good place to look when talking about weapon modding is the weapon workbench. Now, we don't know exactly how this system works because none of the developers mentioned it during the showcase, but we did get to see some different screenshots of it. And as the name would imply, it seems to be where you go to modify any of your different weapons. Now, the weapon they're currently modifying can have up to 7 mods on it, but in other footage we have seen weapons go up to 11 possible mods. So getting different weapons or higher tier weapons, you're going to be able to put a ridiculous amount of mods on these. But we also get to see a handful of different mod slots you're able to modify and change in some way. So we have a receiver, this one is fully automatic. We have internals, this one has no mods, and I'm not exactly sure what type of internal mods we would be able to have. These are more futuristic weapons, so they're probably going to have things that don't exist in the real world. We have optics, currently set at iron sights. We know there's going to be ridiculous amounts of optics. We've even seen things like thermal scopes. We have magazines and batteries. This one currently has a drum magazine. We know there's going to be tons of different magazine types. And then we also have a muzzle, and this has a muzzle brake. But we also got another screenshot that showed more of the examples of the magazine and battery mods. And this was with the same weapon, and once a weapon went into this menu, they had the options of a drum magazine, of explosive rounds, of a medium magazine, a small magazine, or white hot rounds. So the magazine and battery components is going to determine the actual magazine size itself. So say a drum magazine, or this is where you can also modify the weapon's ammunition. So you could go put explosive rounds on it, or something called white hot rounds. And my best guess at what white hot rounds could be is probably something like white phosphorus, which in the game would probably just be a round that applies burning to targets. Now, another interesting part when looking at this workbench is if this person wanted to apply the medium magazine to this weapon, it would take them some tungsten, some sealant, and some lead. So not only are you going to need to research the ability to actually make or apply these different mods, you're also going to need to use resources to install them on the weapon. Now, this is much cheaper than actually researching, so it seems like researching is the actual knowledge to make the thing, and then applying the mod to the weapon is actually crafting it. And we don't know exactly how this is going to work, but presumably you'd be able to obtain different mods throughout the world. Maybe you'd be able to find mods on enemies you defeat, or maybe you'd be able to buy mods from different vendors throughout all the different cities or planets. Now, everything we've been looking at so far is from a ballistics weapon, which would also be physical damage in the game, but we also know of energy weapons and mag weapons that are different types of weaponry, and presumably there are going to be a bunch of unique mods to these different weapon types. And if I would also have to wager a guess, there's probably going to be a bunch of more base mods that are shared between all of these different types. Now, the ballistic weapons we looked at is pretty self-explanatory. These are basically the weapons we have in the real world. We have energy weapons, which you would have seen if you've played any other Fallout game. These are probably also going to encompass things like laser weapons. And then we also have mag weapons. Now, this was a bit more confusing because it really wasn't explained what these are. Some people have theorized that these are built upon a weapon prototype that is in real life as well, called a metal storm. Now, this metal storm prototype in real life is essentially this weapon system that has like 36 different barrels, and they stack ammunition inside every barrel, and then they electronically shoot off every round from every barrel from front to back, allowing this weapon to, in theory, have a fire rate of like 1,000,000 rounds a minute. And this does seem to be somewhat similar to the mag weapons they showed in Starfield. So if they're kind of building off of this prototype, these weapons will have some ridiculously high fire rate. It also did look they were making much more futuristic versions of this, so they would also have things like laser mag weapons. And a small side note, but we do know silencers are going to be a weapon mod in the game, and they are actually going to work correctly as a silencer. So if you're using a silencer, it's obviously going to be much more silent, and it's not going to alert as many people. If you want to play a more sneaky playstyle, you're going to want a weapon with a silencer. Now, another system that's going to play pretty heavily into weapon modding is the rarity system. So in Starfield, we know there's going to be at least up to the legendary rarity, and within this, we've seen the common or base rarity, which is going to be a gray or kind of a base color. We've seen the rare rarity, which is going to be blue. We've seen a purple rarity, which is probably going to be named epic, and then we've seen the legendary rarity, which is orange. And we have actually gotten to see some rare weapons. For instance, this one being the Experiment A7, a rare ballistic shotgun. And going through these different rarities, these weapons and other items are actually going to get different effects applied to them. So a rare weapon is going to have one effect applied to them. For this shotgun, it's Exterminator plus 30% damage against aliens. This one's pretty basic, but it seems like these are going to get more interesting as you get into higher tiers. But say once you get up to the purple or epic rarity, that would have 2 effects, and then once you get up to legendary, that would have 3 effects. Now, we haven't gotten to see above a rare weapon, but we have gotten to see a gear piece that was legendary. It did have 3 different effects on it, and it seemed like those effects were more interesting. Now, something we haven't gotten to see is unique weapons, and I very hope this type of system is in Starfield as well, because unique items in previous Bethesda games have been some of the most interesting items. Now, pre-Fallout 4 in the legendary system, we had things like, say, in Skyrim, where you would find from a quest or just from exploration a very unique weapon which had its own very specific effect. And even though a bunch of these weren't good at all, there were still more interesting effects, and some of them were the strongest weapons in the game. Now, there is still a unique weapon system in Fallout 4 with the rarity system. These would be named weapons, usually legendary, that would still have kind of their own effects, but some of these unique weapons that were also legendary would just have legendary effects on them that could be found randomly on other weapons. Now, my hope for unique weapons in Starfield is that they have their own bespoke effects on them. So say if you find a unique weapon, I would want it to have its own effect on it that you couldn't find on any other weapon. You could only find it on that. Even if it was similar to other effects, I would still want it to be its own unique thing. Maybe it works in a slightly different way, or maybe just the balancing on it is a bit different from other weapons. But I think in a game as expansive as Starfield, having these unique weapons would add such a massive amount of exploration into a game like this. And because of how the planets are generated within Starfield, you could potentially go hundreds of hours within a playthrough with not finding, say, a specific point of interest that you want that holds a specific unique weapon. But when looking at it from the other perspective, this means basically any place you go in the game that could have points of interest and enemies to face, there could be the potential of these super unique weapons that maybe only a handful of other people in the world have found up to that point. And then you have things like getting unique weapons from quests, maybe even super hidden quests. So if this is a concept that's within Starfield, there's going to be a massive amount of content around trying to find these unique weapons. But that's pretty much all I want to go over for weapons and weapon modding within Starfield, and this is one of the systems I'm most excited for. There just seems to be such a massive variety in weapons and weapon mods, so there's going to be a ridiculous amount of things to go try out in combat. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.